The stories you hear about him as the high roller of high rollers, this guy knew how to spend money and how to make it.
He was the best George in Las Vegas, to use your name, meaning most generous tipper. And there were legions of stories about him paying off cocktail waitresses' mortgages, single mothers that needed a loan. I'm not saying he didn't capitalize on that generosity, but Jimmy would come in with his brother Lee, who was a national celebrity drug defense attorney, and they would close down a 21 table and bet $10, $15, $20,000 a hand every spot at a blackjack table. And if you look at the swings of money that can happen between a player holding on all of his hands and the dealer breaking, as opposed to the dealer hitting 21, there was as much as $250,000 at stake on any single hand, and this is in the 1970s. If you factor inflation, you're talking about unimaginable amounts of money they were gambling.
The stories you hear about how they would bring money to Las Vegas, describe some of those. I mean, it's not just, in your wallet.
No, I asked Jimmy in the first long interview I did you bring it in big bags? He goes, no, footlockers. I said, footlockers? How much was in each footlocker? He said, $2 to $3 million, but I would make the cage count it down. I didn't want to go to the trouble. And so when he would roll into Caesars, following behind are 2 footlockers that would go into the casino cage. Obviously, they were a little more lax back then. And Jimmy would say, I'm going to go gamble and we'll settle up later, count the money. And there was one time that Caesars got in trouble with some Asian high-rolling gamblers in Pai Gow poker, and they didn't have enough money in the cage to pay him off. They had to borrow the money from Chagra's footlockers, and he made him sign a marker to him.
So at Caesars and Binion's, he's royalty, right?
And the Sands. Those were the 3 properties where he spent the most money. But Caesars had a casino host that's well known to old-time Las Vegans named Dan Chandler, who was proud of the fact he was fired and rehired like 7 times from Caesars. His security was that he had high-rolling gamblers that would follow Dan wherever he went. So Dan took care of Jimmy to the nth degree. And my favorite story about that is one time after a big score, when one of his ships had unloaded $10 million of marijuana from Mexico or Colombia, Jimmy called Dan Chandler and said, I'm bringing my posse, my pilots and bodyguards to Vegas, and we're going to blow it out for about 3 days. We had a big score. And he goes, I want to be in the Frank Sinatra suite. And Dan Chandler said, well, of course I'd do that for you, Jimmy, but Frank's starring in the showroom. He's on our marquee this week. I can't do that. And Jimmy goes, you either move him out of that suite and let me have it, or we're not coming. And Dan Chandler got the word to Frank Sinatra that there was an asbestos problem in the walls of the suite, and they actually moved Sinatra from the Frank Sinatra suite so this den of drug dealers could move in.